On a humid June night in 1998, the most feared man in Nigeria collapses in a private residence in Abuja. No bullets, no explosion, no crowd. Just a powerful chest that suddenly refuses to rise again. Within hours, rumors of poison, foreign plots, and secret women spread faster than any official announcement. Banks in Europe quietly start preparing for something too. The long, painful unwinding of hidden billions linked to his name. Now imagine winding time back 50 years, to a dusty street in Kano, to a baby whose first cry no one outside his family hears. No headlines, no cameras. No hint that this child will one day hold a nation of more than 100 million people in his fist. Racing against a clock he cannot. See, and against a rival who wants that same power just as badly. This is where Sani Abacha begins. Not in the palace, but in the heat, the noise and the uncertainty of a country that doesn't yet fully exist. He is born on 20th of September 1943 in Kano, in the Muslim north of what is still British-ruled Nigeria. His family is Kanuri, with roots in Borno, a people with a long tradition of warriors, traders, and scholars. The house is simple, the world outside crowded. The smell of dust and frying oil from the markets drifts through open windows, mixing with the murmur of prayers. Before he can even walk, the map around him is already moving. The British Empire is shrinking. Across Africa, flags are changing colors. In the newspapers, adults read and talk about in hushed tones the word independence appears again and again. For a quiet boy sitting in the corner of the room, listening more than speaking, this feels like a world permanently on the edge of something. He grows up in strict discipline. Dawn prayers before the sun has properly broken the horizon. Quranic school, then later, Western-style classes. In the courtyard, older boys argue about politics they barely understand. Federation, self-rule, North and South. Sani does not join in their debates. He stares at them, expression flat, absorbing every word, every tone. What does catch his eye are uniforms. When soldiers pass through Kano, the city slows down for a moment. Boots strike the ground in perfect time. Buttons catch the light. Rifles are held at an angle so precise, it almost looks like an obsession. For a boy surrounded by the messy, unpredictable life of a growing city, this looks like the one thing that makes sense. Order, rules, a world where if you move in the right way, you are obeyed. In those moments, something settles inside him. The future he will choose is not law, not trade, not the pulpit. It is the army. Nigeria gains independence in 1960 when Sani is 17. The Union Jack comes down, the green-white-green flag goes up. People dance in the streets, radios crackle with speeches about unity, progress, and democracy. But the map that looks so clean from a distance is messy up close. Hundreds of ethnic groups, rival political parties, a southern region rich with oil, and a north fearful of being left behind. The promises in those speeches sound bright, but underneath them, tension tightens like a wire. At 19, Sani Abacha takes his first step into the institution that will define his life. He joins the Nigerian army. The military training college in Kaduna is a different planet from the streets of Kano. Here the day is carved into blocks. Wake, run, drill, clean, study, train, sleep. Every minute has a purpose. Every mistake has a cost. The first thing everyone notices about him is not his speed or his strength. It is his silence. While others joke or complain, he watches, expression unreadable. Instructors shout, and he does not flinch. Orders are given, and he follows them exactly, without flourish, without hesitation. On the parade ground, under the sun that shows no mercy to anyone, he is in his element. Straight lines, clear commands, no arguments. Among the cadets, one pattern becomes obvious. The ambitious ones stay close to power. They learn early that in a young country, the army is more than a job. It is a ladder. One boy with a quick smile and easier laughter, Ibrahim Babangida, moves easily from group to group. He is sociable, charming, the kind of man who remembers names and cracks jokes that even the instructors sometimes tolerate. When Sani and Ibrahim cross paths, the contrast is almost theatrical. One radiates charm, the other radiates control. They learn from the same manuals, march under the same sun, eat the same food. They also learn the same lesson. In Nigeria, the barracks may be cleaner than parliament, but the real battles for power are already creeping into both. Abacha's superiors notice his reliability. He does not drink too much. He does not talk too much. He does not question orders. In an army that is slowly becoming a political force, this makes him useful. After training in Kaduna, he is sent abroad to the famous Mons Officer Cadet School in Aldershot, England. For a boy from Kano, the fog, the cold, and the clipped British accents feel like a different universe. But the logic of the military is the same. Here, too, the best cadets are those who obey, who endure, who do not crack. In England, he sees something else. The way an empire manages its officers, the quiet bureaucratic power behind the uniforms. The files, the codes, the hierarchy. In the evenings, when other young men talk about London, clubs, and girls, he thinks about structures, chains of command, the path from junior officer to senior command. If there is a clock in his life, it is ticking quietly now. Nigeria is independent but fragile. Coup rumors drift in like smoke. Whoever wants to shape this country's future has a limited window before chaos or age closes that window forever. Abacha does not yet know that his own body gives him just 54 years on earth, but he feels the pressure of time in another way, in the speed with which his country is unraveling. By the mid-1960s, the experiment with civilian rule is faltering. Elections are disputed, violence erupts, newspapers publish stories about ballot boxes stuffed, opponents intimidated, regions feeling cheated. The promise of 1960s independence celebration starts to rot. In January 1966, the first military coup hits Nigeria like an earthquake. A group of young officers kills top politicians and officers, mostly from the north. Blood flows in official residences and on barracks floors. For millions, this is their first taste of political murder on such a scale. For Sani Abacha, a young officer, it is a brutal confirmation. The army is no longer just an institution of defense. It is now the sharpest knife in Nigerian politics. Then comes the counter-coup in July 1966, led mainly by northern officers, furious at the killings of their leaders. The cycle of revenge grows teeth. Ethnic tension turns into open slaughter in some places. Politicians are no longer the only ones at risk. Ordinary people start to die for what their names sound like, for where they come from. Abacha is on the side of the counter-coup. He is not yet the man on television, not yet the thick-set figure in dark glasses the world will remember. But inside the barracks, his commitment is clear. He does not hesitate. He aligns with the northern officers who want to take the state back by force. This is the first time he truly glimpses what power looks like when uniforms stop pretending to be neutral. Out of this chaos, a new leader emerges. Yakubu Gowon, young, calm, seen as a compromise. He promises unity, but the country is already heading towards something darker. The eastern region, led by Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, moves towards secession. The word Biafra enters the national vocabulary. Negotiations fail. In 1967, war begins. The Nigerian Civil War is not an abstract page in a history book for Abacha. It is his workspace. He serves as a field officer during the conflict. The battlefields are not neat lines on a map. They are muddy roads, burned villages, bodies left beside destroyed bridges. Children with swollen bellies stare at soldiers with a mixture of terror and hope. The sound of artillery becomes background noise. For a man obsessed with order, war is both a horror and an opportunity. It is horror because nothing about it is clean. It is an opportunity because in war, efficiency, obedience, and ruthlessness are rewarded quickly. Abacha builds a reputation inside the army as a man who gets things done. He does not romanticize combat. He does not talk about glory. He focuses on logistics, movement, discipline. If an order is given, he carries it out. If a town is to be taken, he takes it. If a road must be held, he holds it. And in the shadows of those decisions, people die. By the time the war ends in 1970, Biafra is crushed. But the images of starving children and mass graves are burned into the minds of the world. For Nigeria, the cost is more than 1 million lives. For Sani Abacha, the war leaves something else: promotions. He rises through the ranks. Major, then lieutenant colonel, then colonel. Each step up means more men under his command, more access to the small circle where decisions that shape the country are made. The rivalry that will define his career is not open yet, but it is there, in the background. Officers like Ibrahim Babangida also rise. They serve in different units, in different theaters, but their paths cross at strategic points: staff courses, planning meetings, social gatherings around the homes of senior commanders. Babangida is already known for his smile, his political instincts, his ability to talk both to soldiers and civilians. Abacha is known for something else: the man whose face gives nothing away. Two different ways of climbing the same ladder. As the 1970s unfold, the pattern in Nigeria becomes almost hypnotic. Military rulers promise to clean up the mess politicians left. They stay a while. They are overthrown by other military rulers, who promise to clean up the mess the previous military rulers left. Oil money floods the state. Corruption spreads like a stain across every institution. The gap between what leaders say and what they do widens. Abacha watches all of this from within the machine. He serves in key positions: commander of units, staff officer, eventually moving closer to the center of power in Lagos, the capital. He sees how budgets are signed, how contracts are awarded, how loyalty is bought. He understands that in this system, the man who controls the guns and the man who controls the money are often the same, or at least neighbors. The clock is still ticking. He is in his 30s now, then his early 40s. In another kind of country, an officer his age might be thinking about a quiet career, a house, retirement. In Nigeria, officers his age are thinking about something else: whether they will be the ones to knock on the door of the current head of state in the middle of the night and tell him his time is over. Abacha is not loud, but he is patient. He understands that coups are like storms. You cannot be the wind, but you can choose where you stand when the wind comes. In 1983, the civilian government of President Shehu Shagari is drowning in accusations of corruption, vote rigging, and incompetence. Economic crisis grips the country. In the markets, prices jump faster than salaries. On the streets, patience is thin. People whisper the same thing they whispered in the 1960s. Maybe the army will fix this. Inside the barracks, the army is thinking the same thing. The coup that removes Shagari is not a surprise to those in the inner circle. But for the Nigerian public, the first clear sign comes in the form of a man on television. That man is Sani Abacha. On a December day in 1983, millions of Nigerians sit in front of flickering TV sets or gather around radios. The regular programming is cut. The screen changes to a familiar emblem, then to a stocky officer in uniform, cap low, expression hard. His voice is flat, almost mechanical, as he announces that the government has been overthrown, that the military is now in charge, that a new era of discipline and austerity has begun. For years, he has been the silent officer in the background. In that moment, he becomes the face of a coup. Behind him, another general is stepping into ultimate power, Muhammadu Buhari. But for the ordinary Nigerian, the first name tied to this new order is the one they have just heard in that cold, emotionless voice, Sani Abacha. The country shifts again. Another republic falls. Another military regime begins. Inside the army, the balance of power shifts too. The man who announced the coup is rewarded. Abacha moves even closer to the center. He becomes a member of the Supreme Military Council. The meetings he attends now are not about battalion movements or supply lines, but about economic policy, detentions, decrees. And there, sitting in the same rooms, listening to the same briefings, is Ibrahim Babangida. Two ambitious officers. One, the public face of the December coup. The other, the smooth strategist, already building alliances beyond the barracks. They are colleagues, allies when it suits them. But each step up the pyramid reduces the space at the top. There is room for only one man to eventually sit in the highest chair. Abacha knows this. Babangida knows this. They shake hands, exchange salutes, attend the same meetings. But behind the politeness, a quiet race accelerates. The time limit tightens. Abacha is 40. Nigeria is restless. The history of the last 2 decades suggests one thing with cruel clarity. Regimes in this country do not last. Heads of state fall to bullets or voluntary resignations that are anything but voluntary. The question is not if this regime will end, but when, and who will be standing closest to power when it does. In 1985, just 2 years after Buhari's coup, another plot forms in the shadows. Whispers in corridors, late-night visits, coded conversations. Once again, the army is preparing to overthrow itself. This time, when the storm breaks, Sani Abacha is not the man who takes the throne. He is once again the man on the screen, the voice of the new order, the soldier whose presence tells the country that the old ruler is finished and another has taken his place. The new head of state is Ibrahim Babangida. The rival with the easy smile has stepped ahead. The quiet officer who has served loyally, announced coups, kept his face unreadable, remains in the second row, closer to power than ever but still not in the chair. For now, imagine being the man who turns off presidents like a light switch. But every time the room goes dark, someone else sits in the best chair. That is Sani Abacha in 1985. The voice of the coup, the face on the television, the soldier the nation now recognizes instantly. Yet, still not the one whose name is written on the ultimate decree. In the early hours of 27th of August 1985, while most Nigerians sleep under ceiling fans that barely push the heavy air, armored vehicles roll quietly through Lagos. At key junctions, soldiers step out of trucks and take positions. Radio stations are sealed. Telephone exchanges are seized. At Doden Barracks, the seat of power, the guards on the night shift suddenly find themselves staring down the barrels of guns held by fellow soldiers. Inside, a president is being removed. Muhammadu Buhari, the man who promised war against indiscipline, is told that his own time has run out. There is no dramatic shootout, no burning palace, just a transfer of power engineered in whispers, executed in silence and announced, as always in this era, on air. Once again, Nigerians see the camera shake, the screen flicker, the coat of arms appear. Once again, it is Sani Abacha who appears. His uniform is crisp, his cap pulled low, his eyes expressionless. He reads his speech in a slow, heavy voice, as if each word is a weight he is pushing across the room. The Nigerian Armed Forces, in fulfillment of its national role as promoter of stability, unity, and integrity of our country, has taken over the reins of government. Today, outside, people gather around televisions and radios. Some cheer, some sigh with exhaustion. Some just listen, numb, as yet another chapter of military rule begins. But inside the barracks, where rank, ambition, and memory live, the meaning is sharper. The man whose name will go into the history books as the new head of state is Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, the smiling cadet from Kaduna, the officer who glides through social circles as easily as he moves through military ones, the man with a reputation for charm, negotiation, manipulation. Nigerians will soon call him Maradona, after the Argentine footballer who dribbles past defenders with impossible ease. And behind him, not in his shadow but at his shoulder, stands Sani Abacha. He has helped remove a second head of state in 2 years. He has put his own career, his own safety, his own future on the line again. And yet when the dust settles, Babangida sits at the top. Abacha, promoted and rewarded, is made chief of army staff and member of the new armed forces ruling council. But the final prize is still out of reach. 2 men, 1 game, 1 throne. The rivalry is not the kind of loud, dramatic hatred found in movies. They attend the same meetings. They smile for the same group photographs. They call each other by rank, by name. But in a system where almost every ruler eventually falls to another general, both know what is really at stake. For now, they need each other. Babangida needs a loyal, feared enforcer inside the army, a man whose mere presence at a garrison can freeze dissent. He needs someone the rank and file respect and fear, someone who will move troops when asked, crush plots before they mature, send a clear message that the new regime is not weak. Abacha needs access to the center, to information, to the networks of power that reach beyond the barracks and into banks, ministries, foreign capitals. He understands that the closer he stands to the head of state, the more options he will have when the music stops again. Outside, the country feels the struggle in a different way. By the mid-1980s, Nigeria's oil boom has turned into a nightmare. The price of crude has fallen. The easy money that once papered over bad decisions begins to dry up. Under Babangida, the government turns to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. In return for loans, the country is told to swallow structural adjustment, 2 cold words that mean one brutal thing. Ordinary Nigerians will pay. The currency is devalued, subsidies are cut, factories close. Jobs vanish, the cost of imported goods explodes. In the markets, women shout in anger as prices jump between morning and evening. In university dormitories, young men who once believed they would soon become engineers, doctors, lawyers, now face empty prospects. Protests flare. Police and soldiers respond with tear gas, batons, bullets. In this storm, Abacha's role becomes clearer. He is not the one giving long, smooth speeches about economic reforms. That is Babangida's territory, the language of transition, adjustment, sacrifice. Abacha speaks a different language: deployment, cordon, crackdown. When riots erupt, it is the army, the institution whose hierarchy he dominates, that rolls out. He rises quickly. In 1987, he is formally appointed Chief of Army Staff, one of the most powerful positions in the country. 2 years later, he becomes a full general. He is now in that small room at the top of the pyramid, a man who can move divisions with a single order. But every promotion is also a reminder. Time moves only in one direction. He is in his mid-40s now. In a normal country, he might be planning for retirement, picturing grandchildren, a quiet house. In Nigeria, he counts coups. Gowon, Murtala, Obasanjo, Shagari, Buhari, Babangida. Heads of state come and go like seasons. The average lifespan of a regime feels shorter than the career of a single officer. How long, he must wonder, before someone points the gun at the man he stands beside? And when that happens, will he be standing beside him or in front of him? The answer almost arrives in April 1990. It begins before dawn, the time when the body is weakest, when even the most disciplined soldiers are at their drowsiest. Major Gideon Orker and a group of junior officers launch a coup. They storm key sites in Lagos. They seize the radio station. In a broadcast that shocks the nation, they not only announce the overthrow of Babangida, but go further than any Nigerian coup makers. Before them, they declare that several northern states are excised from the Federation. On paper, it's a military operation. In reality, it is a grenade rolled into Nigeria's deepest fault lines: ethnicity, religion, regional rivalry. For a few hours, it seems the regime might fall. Babangida is vulnerable. His location is uncertain. Rumors fly. He has been killed. He has escaped. He has fled the country. In homes across Nigeria, people hold their breath, feel for the direction of the wind. Then, as the sun climbs higher, another familiar voice comes on air. Sani Abacha. He announces that the coup has failed, that loyal troops have regained control, that the head of state is safe. His voice is as flat as ever, but the message it carries is electric. The man who has repeatedly appeared on TV to bury regimes has, this time, kept one alive. The loyalty is not free. By crushing the Orkar coup, Abacha proves 2 things that everyone in power already suspects. The army still follows him, and when The chips are down, he chooses Babangida over the rebels. The price for such loyalty is trust, access, leverage. Behind closed doors, he becomes indispensable to the survival of the regime. He gains not just promotions, but influence over appointments, security decisions, the flow of money that travels quietly outside official budgets. He is not yet the richest or most powerful man in Nigeria, but he is building the network that will later make that possible. And all the while, the clock on Babangida's rule continues to tick. By the late 1980s, the general understands one thing clearly. He cannot rule forever in uniform. International pressure is growing. Western governments talk about democracy. Sanctions and isolation hover like dark clouds over Nigeria's oil fields. More dangerously, inside the country, students, unions, journalists, and ordinary people are losing patience. So Babangida announces a transition to civilian rule. The word transition becomes part of everyday vocabulary. New political parties are created, but only two, both invented and approved by the military government. The Social Democratic Party, SDP, and the National Republican Convention, NRC. Politicians are screened, banned, unbanned. Election dates are set, then shifted. The process becomes so convoluted that some Nigerians joke that the transition is not to democracy, but to forever. From his office, Abacha watches. For a man whose entire identity is wrapped around the army, a world of clear lines, clear ranks, clear chains of command. The messy theater of Babangida's political engineering must look both amusing and dangerous. Amusing because he understands that all these parties, manifestos, and rallies exist under the shadow of soldiers. Dangerous because if the transition ever actually works, if a legitimate civilian government takes root, his window to seize power could close permanently. He is no longer a young man. He cannot wait decades for another chance. In 1993, after years of delay and manipulation, Babangida finally allows a presidential election. On 12th of June, Nigerians go to the polls. Against the expectations of many, the vote is relatively peaceful, and the results that begin to trickle out are astonishing. A wealthy businessman from the southwest, Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, MKO Abiola, is winning not just in his home base, but across regions and religions. Christians vote for a Muslim, Northerners vote for a Southerner. For a brief moment, it feels as if the country might be choosing unity. Then Babangida does something that shocks even a nation used to surprises. He annuls the election, just erases it. It is as if a referee blows the final whistle, watches the scoreboard light up with the winner's name, and then calmly declares that the match never happened. The results are set aside. Abiola is told he cannot be president. Nigerians are told that their votes, their hopes, their brief glimpse of a different future no longer count. The reaction is explosive. Protests erupt in Lagos, Ibadan, Kano, Kaduna. Workers go on strike. Students blockade roads. Newspapers run editorials that do not bother with polite language. For many, this is the betrayal that cannot be forgiven. The legitimacy of the Babangida regime, already thin, tears almost completely. In this chaos, Abacha is something more dangerous than an enforcer. He is an alternative. He has kept his uniform. He has kept his distance from the complicated theater of party politics. He has not run for office, made campaign promises, or stood on podiums waving manifestos. He is still, in the minds of the barracks and many observers, a soldier first. Babangida, cornered, tries one last move. He steps aside. The phrase is chosen carefully. He does not say resign. He announces that he is leaving office, but not abandoning the transition. In his place, he installs an interim national government, headed by a civilian businessman, Ernest Shonekan. On paper, Shonekan is the new head of state. In practice, a crucial detail remains. Sani Abacha is kept on as Minister of Defense and as the most powerful uniformed officer in the country. The rival has left the field, but the soldiers have not left their barracks. The interim government is weak from the start. It lacks popular support. Many Nigerians see it as a puppet arrangement designed to protect Babangida and prevent Abiola from claiming his mandate. It lacks constitutional clarity. Courts question its legality. It lacks economic strategy. The crisis continues, prices rise, confidence falls. But worst of all for Shonekan, it lacks control over the men with guns. Abacha attends cabinet meetings, nods through decisions, keeps his face as unreadable as ever. He visits barracks, speaks to officers, ensures that key commanders remain personally loyal to him. In the corridors of power, a chilling question hangs in the air. Who really runs Nigeria now? The soft-spoken interim leader in civilian clothes or the quiet general in dark glasses sitting 2 chairs away? The clock for Abacha now ticks loudly. He is 50. If a civilian democracy takes root and survives, his chances of ruling Nigeria vanish. If Shonekan somehow stabilizes the country, if Abiola and the pro-democracy movements force a negotiated settlement, history might Remember Sani Abacha as a powerful general, a kingmaker perhaps, but never as king. On 17th of November 1993, he makes his move. The moment is almost shockingly simple. No midnight gun battles, no burning tanks on the streets. Abacha invites Shonekan to a meeting. They talk. The precise words are not recorded in any official transcript, but what happens is clear. Shonekan emerges without power. Shortly afterwards, state media carries the announcement. The interim national government has been dissolved. The armed forces have intervened once again to save the nation from chaos. The constitution already weakened is suspended further. Democratic structures are swept aside like fragile furniture. Then the cameras show a familiar figure. Sani Abacha, in full military dress, sits behind the microphone. The man Nigerians have seen for 10 years, announcing the fall of others, now speaks as head of state himself. His speech is calm, almost dry, as if he were reading out the weather forecast rather than erasing the last fragile traces of civilian rule. Fellow Nigerians, the interim national government, which came into being following the crisis of the annulment of the 12th June elections, has failed to meet the aspirations of our people. He promises order. He promises stability. He speaks of correcting wrongs, of restoring confidence, of guiding the country through a turbulent time. To some watching from cramped living rooms and crowded bars, it sounds like yet another general offering the same worn-out script. To others, there is a different, more chilling realization. For the first time, the man in the uniform and the man in the chair are the same. The rivalry with Babangida, the long dance between the charming strategist and the silent enforcer, the years of second-row power, the nights spent planning coups that gave others the throne, all of it has led to this. Sani Abacha has finally beaten the clock. He controls the guns, he controls the state. He has outlasted the man who once seemed destined to remain forever above him. He has stepped from the edge of the stage into the blinding white circle of power. What he does with that power, the way he will bend the country around his will, the speed and scale with which fear will spread, the hidden billions that will leak out of Nigeria into silent foreign accounts, the bodies that will fall in prison yards and execution grounds belongs to the next act of his story. For now, in late 1993, one fact is undeniable. The quiet officer from Kano, the boy who once stared in awe at soldiers marching through dusty streets, has become the most powerful man in Africa's most populous country. And the nation, already bruised and exhausted, is about to discover how heavy his hand can be. He comes to power promising to save Nigeria from chaos. Instead, he turns the whole country into a waiting room, where the door is locked from the outside. And he is the only man holding the key. From his first week as head of state, Sani Abacha moves like a man who knows time is not his friend. He dissolves the shaky interim government with a single announcement. He suspends parts of the Constitution that still pretend civilians have a say. He bans political activities, shuts down elected institutions, sweeps away what is left of the Babangida-era transition with one broad military gesture. On paper, he creates something new, the Provisional Ruling Council, the PRC. In reality, it is the oldest thing in Nigerian politics, ruled by a small circle of men in uniform, with one man at the center. Abacha's style of governing is brutally simple. Where Babangida liked to talk, to tease, to float ideas like balloons and see which ones rose, Abacha prefers decrees written in hard ink. His laws say openly what others use to hide between the lines. His decrees cannot be challenged in any court. If a decree clashes with the Constitution, the decree wins. Judges can keep their wigs and gowns, but their power over him is gone. He centralizes security under his control. Intelligence agencies, police units, military directors, everyone with access to wiretaps, detention cells, or guns, answers ultimately to him. A web of fear begins to stretch quietly across the country. The State Security Service, military intelligence, special strike forces operating in the shadows. But he knows that fear alone is not enough. A ruler who offers nothing but terror invites open rebellion, so Abacha tries something else too. He buys time. Oil prices are not generous, but Nigeria is still a producer. Under his watch, foreign reserves start to rise. He keeps fuel prices relatively low at the pump. Cheap petrol, in a country built around generators and old cars, is a powerful narcotic. He launches development initiatives, the most famous of them the Petroleum Trust Fund, the PTF. And then, in a twist that would look unbelievable in fiction, he calls back a man he once overthrew. Muhammadu Buhari, the disciplined General Abacha helped remove in 1985, is appointed to head the PTF. One former head of state now runs a huge pool of oil money, formerly to build roads, repair schools, supply medicine, fix refineries. Billions of naira flow through PTF contracts. Some projects do get built. Stretches of highway repaired, hospitals stocked, textbooks delivered. For many Nigerians, the PTF is the only visible sign that government money sometimes touches real life. But inside the maze of contracts and subcontracts, another reality grows. A system where loyalty is rewarded, where allies are fed, where the boundary between state funds and private gain melts quietly away. Outside the capital, storms are gathering. The deepest of them lies in the oil-soaked soil of the Niger Delta. For years, the small Ogoni people have watched pipelines snake across their farmlands, gas flares burn over their villages, rivers turn black with spills. They see wealth flowing out from their land into distant capitals, while their own homes sink into poverty. Under the leadership of a writer and activist, Ken Saro-Wiwa, the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, MOSOP, grows from a local protest group into a symbol of resistance. To the international world, Saro-Wiwa is a gentle, articulate figure in glasses and traditional cap, speaking on television about ecological war, about the destruction of his homeland. To Abacha's government, he is something else, a dangerous rallying point in the heart of the country's oil zone. In 1994, tensions explode. There are clashes and killings inside Ogoniland. The regime seizes the chance. Saro-Wiwa and several other activists are arrested, accused of involvement in murder, dragged before a special tribunal. The trial is fast, harsh, widely condemned as a sham. Witnesses later say they were bribed. International human rights groups scream. Diplomats write cables filled with warnings. Abacha does not blink. On 10th of November 1995, in a grim prison yard in Port Harcourt, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 fellow Ogoni activists are hanged. No last-minute pardon, no gesture of mercy. The world watches in horror as the news breaks. Within days, Nigeria is suspended from the Commonwealth. Sanctions tighten. Foreign investors grow even more nervous. Newspapers everywhere describe Abacha with new words: brutal, iron-fisted, pariah. Inside Nigeria, the message is even clearer. This is not a ruler who fears international opinion. This is a man prepared to cut off the country's most eloquent voice of protest and let the body hang in the wind. But Saro-Wiwa is not the only rival Abacha has to deal with. In Lagos, in exile, in hidden safe houses across the country, another name pulses like a heartbeat: Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola. To his supporters, Abiola is the man who won the 12 June 1993 election, the president who never took office, the symbol of stolen democracy. Pro-democracy groups rally around him. Strikes, demonstrations, underground radio, MKO is the face of a different Nigeria that might have been. For a while, Abacha seems to play a balancing game. He hints at transition timetables. He releases some detainees, tightens the leash on others. He speaks of a constitutional conference, of a future civilian government. The word transition returns to political vocabulary, this time wearing his uniform. But time again is a weapon and a threat. He is no longer the younger general in someone else's regime. He is a man in his 50s with a heavy frame, rumored health problems, and enemies in every direction, abroad, in the streets, inside the barracks. He cannot leave the question of succession vague forever. Every year he delays the return to democracy. He risks a coup. Every year he allows genuine elections. He risks seeing Abiola, or someone like him, walk into Aso Rock with a popular mandate that no decree can erase. In June 1994, Abiola makes his own move. Tired of waiting, under pressure from supporters, he declares himself the rightful president of Nigeria at a rally in Lagos. The statement is bold, defiant, almost suicidal. In a country where the army still holds real power, saying, "I am the president," without the general's blessing is like lighting a match in a room filled with gas. Abacha reacts predictably and ruthlessly. Abiola is arrested and charged with treason. He disappears into a world of solitary cells and carefully controlled visits. For years, Nigerians will not see him in public. They will hear only rumors of his health, unconfirmed stories of his condition. The man who might have led a different Nigeria becomes a ghostly figure, a prisoner whose name is shouted in protests, but whose face slowly fades from view. At the top, the conflict sharpens into something cold and personal. Abacha has what Abiola never got: the presidential seat, the title, the keys to power. But Abiola has what Abacha will never truly possess: the memory of a clean, broad mandate from the people. One rules by decree, the other rules in the realm of legitimacy and myth. Each man's existence undermines the other's claim to history. In response, Abacha tightens his grip further. Opposition newspapers are shut down. Journalists vanish into detention or flee abroad. Radio stations that dare to criticize the regime are raided. Human rights activists are surveilled, threatened, arrested. Student unions and labor leaders find themselves followed, their phones tapped, their meetings infiltrated. And inside the military, a quieter, more dangerous game unfolds. A regime built on fear must always fear its own base. In 1995, the government announces that it has uncovered a coup plot. The list of alleged conspirators sends a chill through the country. Former head of state Olusegun Obasanjo, respected General Shehu, Musa Yar'Adua, and other senior officers are arrested, tried by a secret military tribunal, and given long prison sentences. Some receive the death penalty, later commuted under intense international pressure. For many Nigerians, the message is unmistakable. If Obasanjo, a man who once voluntarily handed power to civilians, can be dragged into a courtroom in chains, no one is safe. Shehu Musa Yar'Adua will never leave prison alive. He dies in custody in 1997, under circumstances that remain clouded. Officially, illness. Unofficially, the rumors are darker. Poisoning, deliberate neglect. Whatever the truth, another prominent figure is erased from the political chessboard. Abacha's inner circle shrinks. Trust becomes a rare, expensive commodity. Then comes one of the strangest and most chilling episodes of his rule. In December 1997, Nigerians wake to the news of yet another alleged coup plot. This time led, the regime claims, by the man closest to Abacha himself, his own chief of general staff, Lieutenant General Oladipo Dia. Dia has been, in theory, Abacha's second-in-command, the civilian-facing general, the one who sometimes speaks softer words to the outside world. Now he's shown on state television in handcuffs, head bowed, looking dazed and broken. Secretly recorded video later surfaces. Dia, in a hotel room, expressing fear, hinting that he suspects a trap. Was there really a coup? Did Dia plot to remove Abacha? Or did Abacha set up the entire drama to purge a rival and frighten every other ambitious officer into submission? The truth remains buried in classified files and whispered accounts. But the effect is clear. The trial is televised, the humiliation public, the sentence is severe. Death by firing squad. Once again, under pressure, some sentences are later commuted. But the image that lingers is powerful. The second most powerful man in Nigeria, kneeling in front of a military tribunal, begging for his life. By now, Abacha's Nigeria feels less like a country and more like a heavily guarded compound. Checkpoints sprout on highways. Armed men stand at street corners in Lagos and Kano. Political meetings are watched. Even inside family homes, people lower their voices when his name comes up. Parents warn their children not to speak carelessly in public. The fear is not theatrical. It is everyday, woven into conversations, into the length of pauses, into the habit of looking over his shoulder before saying anything that might be interpreted as insult. And yet, paradoxically, life goes on. Markets still open at dawn. Buses still rumble between cities. Musicians still release albums, sometimes slipping coded criticism into lyrics. Football still brings spontaneous joy. In the middle of repression, small pockets of normality survive because they must. People marry, have children, plant crops, chase contracts. Human beings do not pause their lives, even under dictatorships. Abacha understands this instinct and uses it. He continues to talk of transition. He announces a new political program, a set of carefully controlled parties, all of them manufactured within the safe sandbox of his system. Politicians banned under Babangida are allowed, some of them, to return. Conferences are held, committees formed, decrees drafted. On paper, Nigeria is once again walking slowly towards civilian rule. But the design is strange. The political parties, 5 in total, begin to look suspiciously similar in one crucial way. They all seem to be positioning themselves, not to replace Abacha, but to endorse him. Posters appear, rallies are held. Draft Abacha movements, allegedly spontaneous, spring up across the country, calling on the general to complete the transition by transforming himself from military ruler into civilian president. The idea is outrageous and, at the same time, eerily plausible. The man who seized power by announcing the failure of democracy now presents himself as the only one who can safely reintroduce it. It is a race against several clocks at once. Internationally, sanctions bite deeper. Nigeria's reputation is in shreds. Diplomats avoid Abuja with the wary politeness reserved for dangerous neighbors. The country risks isolation even in Africa. Pressure builds for genuine elections, for the release of Abiola, for respect of human rights. Domestically, the pro-democracy movement refuses to die. Strikes, underground newsletters, student protests, clandestine radio broadcasts. This is a war fought in leaflets and whispers as much as in streets and courtrooms. Every time Abacha delays his promised transition date, the anger rises. And then there is the most merciless clock of all, his own body. Abacha is not an old man, but he looks older than his years. His weight, his rumored heart problems, his intense, secretive lifestyle, all of it feeds speculation. His enemies tell jokes in private about the strong man who fears a minor cough more than a major coup, about the dictator whose real rival is not a general but a cardiologist. In quiet moments, alone in Aso Rock, he must feel it too. He has spent a lifetime climbing to this peak. From a boy watching soldiers march in Kano, to the invisible architect of coups, to the iron ruler of Africa's most populous country. He has outmaneuvered Babangida. He has neutralized Abiola. He has silenced Sarawiwa. He has caged Obasanjo. He has marched through crises that would have drowned weaker men. And yet, for all the noise of his rule, there is a strange, almost invisible river flowing just beneath the surface of his government. Money, suitcases, wire transfers, coded messages, offshore accounts. Under Abacha, billions of dollars disappear from Nigeria's oil revenues into the shadows. Some of it moves through bogus security contracts. Some is funneled via trusted family members and associates. Some travels in cash, in foreign currencies, stuffed into bags and flown out under diplomatic cover. He is not the first Nigerian leader to steal, but the scale of the operation under his rule pushes him into a different category entirely. Later, the world will give his name to a particular kind of stolen wealth. Abacha loot. For now, in the mid-1990s, ordinary Nigerians do not know the exact figures. They only feel the symptoms. Infrastructure still crumbles, hospitals still lack medicine, schools still struggle, and yet there is a small, unreachable class that seems immune to every hardship, living in high-walled mansions with generators that never go off, and cars that never run out of fuel. The rivalry that once defined his career, Abacha versus Babangida, has mutated into something larger and more intangible. Abacha versus the idea of accountability. Abacha versus the future judgment of his own people. He tries to shape that future. State media praise his war on indiscipline, his efforts to stabilize the currency, his investments through the PTF, his alleged successes in law and order. Supporters point to repaired roads, new diesel generators for hospitals, salary arrears quietly paid. They say, yes, he is tough, but he gets things done. They ask, which is better, endless chaos or a firm hand? Opponents answer with a different list. The bodies of executed activists, the faces of political prisoners, the empty chair where Abiola should be sitting, the countless nameless Nigerians beaten, jailed, or silenced. They whisper about the hidden billions, about the way the regime has turned corruption into a system rather than an accident. By 1998, the tension is almost unbearable. The 5 government-created parties line up one after another to nominate Abacha as their sole presidential candidate. It is a grotesque pantomime of democracy. Several parties, one name, one outcome. Behind the scenes, some military officers are uneasy. Some civilians are disgusted. Some are simply afraid. Abacha stands on the brink of something unprecedented, transforming himself openly from military dictator into civilian president, and crowned by a carefully managed election where the only real choice on the ballot is him. The man who once operated in the shadows of other men's coups is now poised to rewrite the rules entirely, to prove that in Nigeria, how you can seize power in uniform and then legitimize it in a suit, without ever truly letting go. He has beaten his rivals. He has bent institutions. He has outlasted storms. All that remains is to survive long enough to walk through that final door, to see his own name on a ballot paper, on an inauguration, script on history's list of elected leaders. The clocks around him tick louder. The pressure on him intensifies. The eyes of the world, of his enemies, of his own nervous allies, are fixed on the presidential villa. And then, in a way no one expects, the story takes a turn that no decree, no coup, no secret security file can control. On the morning of 8th of June, 1998, the most feared man in Nigeria wakes up in a palace full of guards, guns, and gold. And yet, he has less than 12 hours left to live, and no one in that building, not even him, can stop the countdown. Outside Aso Rock, the air in Abuja is heavy and ordinary. Civil servants hurry to offices. Street hawkers arrange oranges and plastic bags of water in the sun. Radio stations play music and cautious news. Somewhere in the city, a rusted taxi driver curses the traffic and the price of spare parts. Nigerians wake up to another day under Sani Abacha, expecting more of the same. Decrees, rumors, fear. No one expects the regime itself to suddenly run out of time. Inside the presidential villa, the routine is familiar. Guards at attention, a tight inner circle of trusted aides, phones that connect straight into the nerve system of the state. Abacha, the general who has walked through coup attempts and international outrage, begins his day not like a man under threat, but like a man preparing his next move. Because in his mind, the game is not over. It has only reached a critical stage. The 5 government-approved parties have already marched, one by one, to nominate him as their presidential candidate. The transition has been redesigned into a coronation by ballot. The timetable is ambitious. Within months, if all goes according to plan, Abacha will remove his uniform, put on a civilian agbada, and be sworn in as Nigeria's elected president. He is racing a set of calendars pinned inside his head. Election dates, international summits, quiet deadlines whispered by foreign envoys. And then there is the one calendar no one can see, the private schedule of his own heart. That morning, the rumor mill will later say, he complains of discomfort, chest pains, fatigue. The official story will speak of a heart attack, sudden and catastrophic. The unofficial stories are far more cinematic. Poison disguised as a treat, a fatal dose slipped into a drink, even tales of a night of indulgence with foreign companions turned deadly. In Nigeria, where power has always been surrounded by myths, the strongest man's final minutes immediately become a battlefield of stories. What is not in dispute is this. By afternoon, Sani Abacha is dead. In a country used to coups, the news moves like an electric shock. There are no tanks on the streets, no radio announcement by young officers at dawn, no gunfire in the capital. Instead, there is confusion, disbelief, whispers traveling faster than any newspaper. Civil servants hear it first in hushed tones in corridors. They say the head of state has died. Markets buzz, mosques and churches fill with people who have nothing but rumor and prayer. For the first time in years, the man Nigerians fear most is suddenly removed from the equation by something no security service can arrest. Death has done what opposition, sanctions, and protest could not. Yet even in death, his shadow does not loosen its grip immediately. The military moves quickly, sealing off the villa, containing information, choosing a successor. There must be no vacuum, no chance for chaos. The same system that allowed one general to hold the country in a fist now must find another hand fast. Within hours, the army settles on a name. General Abdul Salami Abubakar. He is quiet, less flamboyant than the men who came before. A soldier's soldier, not a political showman. To many Nigerians, he is an unknown quantity, a new face at the top of a familiar uniformed pyramid. But he walks into power with an urgent problem ticking right in front of him. Abacha is gone. His rival, Moshood Abiola, is still alive, somewhere in detention. For 5 years, the conflict between these two men has defined Nigerian politics like a slow, stubborn war. One holds the physical office of power, the other holds the moral title in the imagination of millions. The man who, they believe, won the 1993 election. Even with Abacha dead, Abiola's existence remains a challenge to the system that kept him locked away. Abubakar faces a brutal choice and very little time. He can continue Abacha's path, keep Abiola in prison, stage another carefully controlled transition, hope the world eventually gets tired of shouting about June 12th, or he can change course, open the cell, bring Abiola out into the sunlight, and risk detonating years of pent-up anger in the streets. The clock is now on the side of the country itself. Sanctions have bitten deep. Nigeria's economy staggers under the weight of lost investment and bad reputation. Universities have suffered under strikes and neglect. The Niger Delta simmers. Anger in the creeks over oil and injustice is turning darker, more militant. The prisons hold some of the country's brightest minds. Men like Olusegun Obasanjo, locked away by Abacha in the name of security. Every day that passes with the same old approach is another day the country inches closer to the edge. Abubakar moves faster than many expect. He relaxes the worst of the press restrictions. Political exiles begin to return. Key prisoners are released, stepping out of cells into a sun that, for them, feels almost unreal. Obasanjo walks free, thinner, older, but alive. The message is clear. This is not a carbon copy of the previous regime. A new script might be possible. But the most explosive question remains unresolved. What to do with Abiola? Inside detention, Abiola has become a symbol more than a man, a living banner for democracy. Outside, his name is painted on walls, printed on illicit t-shirts, shouted in protests. Diplomats whisper that his release is essential if Nigeria wants to be welcomed back into the international community. Activists insist that June 12th must be honored, not erased. At the same time, the military establishment fears what his freedom could unleash. What if he insists on being sworn in? What if he refuses compromise? What if his return turns into an uncontrollable wave? Abubakar chooses a middle path, at least on paper. Talks begin, envoys shuttle. Conditions are discussed. Recognition that Abubakar is now head of state, a possible pardon. Arrangements for a dignified exit that avoids tearing the country in two. It is like trying to defuse a bomb that has been ticking for 5 years. Then, barely a month after Abacha's sudden death, the second shock hits. On 7th July 1998, Moshood Abiola collapses and dies, inside custody, during a meeting with visiting American officials. Once again, the official explanation speaks of natural causes of heart problems. Once again, Nigerians greet the news with a wave of disbelief and rage. Two central figures of the country's greatest political drama, both gone within 30 days, both in circumstances that feel too convenient. not too cruel to be coincidence. On the streets of Lagos and other cities, protests erupt. In the southwest, Abiola's stronghold, grief and fury mix into something raw and dangerous. Tires burn, stones fly. Security forces struggle to keep order. Families lock their doors and wait, listening to distant sirens, radio bulletins, the thump of boots on pavement. The rivalry that defined the 1990s, a silent duel between Abacha's decrees and Abiola's mandate, ends not in a courtroom, not in an election, but in two sudden deaths. It is an ending so abrupt, so unsatisfying, that it feels less like closure and more like a wound. Yet history does not pause to mourn for long. It demands decisions, deadlines, signatures. Abdul Salami Abubakar understands that Nigeria cannot survive another endless transition, another cycle of promises and postponements. He commits publicly to a rapid handover to civilian rule. He gives himself less than a year, an astonishingly short time, in a system that has grown addicted to open-ended timelines, to dismantle. 15 years of almost continuous military dominance. A new race against time begins. Political parties, this time not manufactured to nominate a single general, spring to life. Old names return, some carrying scars from exile, others carrying the quiet guilt of having served under previous regimes. Nigerians, skeptical but hungry for change, register for voter cards. The machinery of democracy, rusty from repeated betrayal, begins to move again. And somewhere in this swirl of new possibilities, an unexpected figure walks back into the frame. Olusegun Obasanjo. The same Obasanjo who once voluntarily handed power to civilians in 1979, the same Obasanjo whom Abacha's regime dragged into court on coup charges, sentenced, and locked away. He has gone from commander-in-chief to prisoner to, suddenly, a civilian politician in contention for the highest office again. For many Nigerians, the symbolism is dizzying. Abacha's in the ground, Abiola's in the ground. Obasanjo, their contemporary, their fellow general, the man who sat in a cell under Abacha's watch, is now the frontrunner to lead the new Nigeria. In February 1999, in elections watched closely at home and abroad, Obasanjo wins the presidency. On 29th of May, dressed not in uniform but in flowing agbada, he takes the oath of office. The military steps back, formally at least, from direct rule. After decades of coups and interrupted transitions, Nigeria finally experiences something close to a clean handover. Abacha is not there to see it, but his fingerprints are everywhere. The prisons Obasanjo orders emptied were filled on Abacha's watch. The distrust of government that runs through conversations in markets and bars was sharpened under Abacha's decrees. The agitation in the Niger Delta, which will soon grow into armed militancy, was fed by years of repression and neglect that reached a bloody peak with the hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni Nine. And then there is the money. As the new civilian administration begins to look into the books, a picture emerges that confirms the worst suspicions. Huge sums, hundreds of millions, then billions of dollars, have vanished from the central bank and from oil revenues through a web of security withdrawals, fake contracts, and offshore transfers. What had been whispered now gains a concrete, ugly shape. Abacha loot. The phrase enters Nigerian vocabulary like a bitter joke. Investigators trace funds to bank accounts in Switzerland, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Jersey, and beyond. They find money controlled by family members, by associates, by shell companies that exist only on paper. Each new discovery feels like another slap. While hospitals ran out of medicine, while classrooms crammed 3 children onto one. Broken desk, while power cuts plunged cities into darkness. Staggering amounts of public money were being quietly exported under the signature of one man and his tight circle. The rivalries of the past are replaced by a new one. The struggle between the memory Abacha wanted to leave behind and the memory that reality insists on building. In government-controlled media during his lifetime, he was the man who brought stability, the strong hand that held Nigeria together when it might have fallen apart. He was the general who paid salary arrears, who funded roads and clinics through the Petroleum Trust Fund, who stood up to foreign pressure. Supporters still point, years later, to a repaired highway, a stocked hospital ward, a bag of fertilizer that arrived in a rural farming community with PTF printed on the side. But in the minds of many Nigerians, a different image hardens with each passing year. Abacha, as the ultimate symbol of unaccountable power, the dictator whose regime executed activists, jailed opponents, shut mouths, and looted on a historic scale. His rivalry with Abiola continues in the landscape of memory. Abiola died in custody, denied the chance to govern. For a while, it seems his name might fade into the background of Nigerian history, a tragic footnote. But activists refuse to let June 12 die. Anniversaries are marked with protests, then with marches, then with more official recognition. Years later, the date of Abiola's election is eventually declared Democracy Day, a public holiday honoring the struggle that cost so many their freedom and their lives. Abacha, once the man with the keys to power, finds his name used in a very different way. In headlines about recovered funds, in speeches about corruption, in textbooks as a cautionary tale. In the Niger Delta, the seeds planted under his rule burst into the open. Militants sabotage pipelines, kidnap oil workers, blow up installations. The region, exhausted by decades of environmental damage and economic marginalization, becomes the site of a new kind of conflict, not protests with placards, but armed groups in the creeks using speedboats and automatic weapons. The ghost of the regime that hanged Sarawiwa hovers over every negotiation table. Yet history, especially in Nigeria, refuses simple moral arithmetic. There are still those who, even while acknowledging his brutality, argue that Abacha's economic policies prevented a complete collapse. They point to relatively stable fuel prices during his era, to external reserves that did not entirely evaporate, to the fact that salaries were often paid on time after years of irregularity. In a country that has been repeatedly battered by both dictatorship and chaos, some quietly say, he was a thief, but at least we knew who was in charge. Others answer sharply, he was a thief, and that is exactly why we need to remember. This argument does not happen in history books alone. It plays out in taxis and living rooms, in university classrooms and roadside bars, in songs and in comedy skits. A new generation grows up who never saw his face on television in real time, who never had to lower their voice when mentioning his name, but who inherit the consequences of his rule. The institutions weakened, the norms distorted, the money removed that might have built stronger schools, cleaner water, better hospitals. And all the while, far away in bank offices and courtrooms in Europe, another race against time continues. Each time a foreign government announces it has located a new tranche of Abacha loot, $700 million here, $300 million there, Nigerians follow the news with a mix of grim satisfaction and weary skepticism. Satisfaction, because the scale of the theft is finally being exposed in numbers that the world cannot ignore. Skepticism, because they know that stolen money can be stolen twice, that returned funds can quietly disappear again if the systems have not changed. Abacha wanted to write his own ending, to stand in front of the world as a civilian president, to show that he could outmaneuver not just rivals in uniform, but the entire concept of accountability. He came breathtakingly close. The parties were lined up, the script was written. The only real opponent left, Abiola, was locked away behind concrete and steel. In the end, the competitor he could not outplay was not a general, not a civilian, not a foreign power. It was time itself. Time stopped his heart in a palace guarded by thousands of guns. Time erased his chance to legitimize his rule at the ballot box. Time slowly reshaped his image from strongman to warning, from unchallengeable presence to case study in how much damage concentrated power can inflict on a country that does not yet have strong enough defenses. Today, when Nigerians argue about leadership, when they warn about the danger of giving one person too much unchecked control, they often do not need to mention his name. It hangs in the air anyway, like a lesson written once in very large, very dark letters. Sani Abacha is long gone. But the clocks he set ticking, the countdowns of institutions weakened, of money stolen, of trust broken, are still being heard, still being repaired, still shaping the choices of a country that, again and again, has had to pull itself back from the edge and decide what kind of future it wants to fight for.